I'd like to call the meeting to order, the Finance, Audit, and Legislative Affairs Committee meeting. First order of business, I need a motion to allow Betty Duncan on the phone. Can I get a motion, please? Rob, second. Linda. All those in favor? Aye. Any nays? Okay. Welcome, Betty.
Thank you. Welcome.
No approval of minutes, so we'll move on to informational items. We have the monthly financial report.
Good afternoon. All right, we have the first quarter of the fiscal year in front of you today, so that's through March 31st of 2024. I have a few highlights that I went through that I was going to share with you today. This is more for a quarter perspective, not necessarily specifically for March alone. Looking at the intergovernmental revenues, I just want to highlight that sometimes those might look lower than you would expect, but a lot of the times that has to do with the fact that we have a lot of grants in there, and sometimes not all the grants are tied to operating expenditures. So sometimes they're tied to capital purchases, like we have a $1.1 million grant for the courts to purchase, I believe it was equipment, so that's in there. We have the Stark County to do the ETSB facilities, and then we have Dry Run Creek. So sometimes those projects have different timing, and so the grant revenue isn't recognized as quickly if the expenses are not there. So that might be a reason why intergovernmental revenues are not as high as you would expect. Another key factor playing into that is the PPRT tax. We have received about 5 distributions so far, and we are a little bit behind where I was hoping we would be. Once we get to July, that distribution, we should be usually about 75% roughly of where we would normally expect. So we'll have a better idea once we get that July distribution. So the July committee report will have a little better. Still 25% can, there's always huge fluctuation. So, but we'll do our best to see what we can project. Along with charges for services, I just wanted to highlight here, this is something that you can't really necessarily see from this report, but last year we actually had some revenue that we actually didn't recognize until May, and so the charges for services through the current year are more current, and those were for the employee and the employer portion for the health insurance. And so I looked at that, and with what we budgeted, we are right on the money where we're supposed to be at 25%. So that's good for the employee health fund. So that should be favorable. Fines, we switched up how we are accounting for the fines on residents and companies that file or pay their property taxes late. And so instead of reflecting that on property taxes, now that's reflected in fines. So the fines will always be really low until we get to December and we post what those are, because that's usually just done at the end of the year. So don't be alarmed as the year progresses and that is lower. One item that I noticed in other financing sources with this last year's audit, we have GASB pronouncements that come out, and we had last year implemented for leases where we have to record the what would be an asset to us and what to be a liability as far as our leases that the county has, whether we rent or we lease out our property. And then this year we had to do a new GASB pronouncement for GASB 96 as far as software for service. So to make a long story short, we actually changed how we are recording some of the transactions that are required by GASB, but as far as budget, it's way too in the weeds that we really don't need to go there. We have to recognize it on the financial report and not for budget. So for other financing sources, there was $78,000. We will never get that revenue because we have moved it to a different program that will not be reflected in the budget. If you want more details, I'm happy to talk to you offline. It'll be a little bit easier to explain. And as far as just the high level of revenues, that's what I have. Expenses, everything is lined. Just one thing to highlight is that the ETSB paid off their Motorola radio system, so that debt is paid off. So that's kind of like the biggest thing to highlight. Everything else is status quo. And last, I think the most exciting thing for those of you who read the packet, we put in there reflected the long-term care services fund. We did the transfer as of fiscal year 23. So we transferred about $3.27 million, and the ending fund balance as of FY23 is just under, in deficit of 200,000. So with property taxes coming in next month, I believe that that fund should be positive and start to have interest income being earned as of June. So, and the last thing that just came in, the last highlight, which is not reflected in the quarterly report, but we did just receive in this last week, the city of Peoria paid the Will and Knowles debt that they owed. So we received that $1.8 million, and that goes into the Keystone Fund. So it is money in to help to pay off that, or use that cash to pay for the $3 million loan that was just approved this last month. So that's all I had highlighted for today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Julie? Okay. Well, I think you reported on the long-term care services fund report. Can you just quickly, what is our, how long do you think it will be before we, I know you can't specifically say, but it won't be 9 years, correct?
Correct. Conservative estimates going forward would be 2030, but my guess is it'll be before then, and they're callable in 2032. So, yeah, things are moving along as you had hoped.
Yes, thank you. Great work on that. Okay, April 2024 accounts payable review.
Yep. They're detailed in your packet as they have been for, this is for the month of April. So if you have any specific questions on these, I'm happy to try to help.
Are there any specific questions? Okay. Moving on, Peoria County capital projects, funding sources, and progress.
Yep, this is an update through May 16th of 2024 with all of the capital projects that we have on deck and in progress for the county. In the far right column is the progress to date, and you can see how much we have paid out through May 16th. If you have any specific questions, I can answer those.
Okay, any specific questions? Okay, thank you. Moving on, we are at summary of significant risks of external audit.
Yes, so this is a letter that is a recent standard, a recent GASB standard requires our external auditing firm to communicate the risks identified during the audit and planning process to those charged with governance. So we're presenting this letter to you today. They have to identify and assess the risks that could affect the organization being audited. There are risks that are for every entity, and that's basically the management override of controls and improper revenue recognition due to fraud. So every entity faces those. And then new this year, specific to Peoria County, but really every county, every organization, is the implementation of GASB 96 standard, because this is the first, 2023 is the first fiscal year that we had to report on these subscription-based information technology agreements, otherwise known as SPIDAs.
Okay.
So very exciting stuff.
Is there any questions about that letter? No, we're awful quiet today, folks. Okay, we are at external audit services request for proposal update.
So we went out for bid for an external auditing firm. As you know, we've had SIGITCH for an extension past the original contract date. And so we put an RFP out in the end of March, and we received 3 proposals back. We were originally intending to have a recommendation to this month's committee, but our small review committee met, and we had a few more questions that we wanted to ask, and we want to do a very thorough and deliberate review of the process. And so we should have a recommendation after we do interviews with representatives from the firms. We should have a recommendation at the June committee, but we just want to keep you guys abreast of the process.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, next is food and beverage summary.
Yes. So at the March committee meeting, you had requested that we pull together 6 months worth of detail of the food and beverage spend for the county. Attached is our two pieces. We did a detail of all the transactions, and we kind of cleaned up the descriptions so that they could be sorted and combined a little more. And we sorted them first by the recipient. So on the far second to left column is kind of who they go to: clients, participants, detainees, jury, and outreach events, community events, and then staff. And so on the very last page of the packet is a summary by department, broken out by staff, and then all of the other categories combined. And then the percentage of the total spend is in the far right column.
Were there any questions regarding that report? Paul?
Sorry about that. Are some of these just the normal food that they're buying and that, or is this all extra stuff in this report? I mean, like the jail and juvenile detention, I know they have to feed the inmates and so forth. And I know some of it's for, when they had training sessions and that, but I was just wondering if a lot of it was just the normal food that they would be getting, or if some of it's, or if this is for the extra stuff, not counting their meals.
Okay.
This report includes all of the expenses. And so if you see, that's kind of hard to tell, but if you, like, for example, look at the detainees and you see alpha baking, that's bread for the detainees, things like that. Yes, that's mainly for the detainees. Now, with the contract that we have with Eurus Dining Services with the jail, they also contract out to feed the juvenile detention center detainees, and so a portion of that, you'll see the juvenile detention center pays the Peoria County Sheriff, and that's to reimburse them for what they spent through the Eurus contract. Yes, yep. Good question.
Did that answer your question, Paul? Great, okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. We were at FY 2025 budget calendar already.
Yes, I know. We go right from one thing into another, which is good. So we're ramping up for the fiscal 25 budget schedule right now, the budget season, and we took the feedback that you had from our October board meeting where you voted on the fiscal 24 budget, and we put our heads together and we came up with what we feel is a good resolution to meet all of the goals and to give you guys more time to review the budget book when it's out. And so we're going to start the process. Revenue budgets will be due from departments June 24th. The expenditure budgets will be due July 15th. And then their KPIs, key performance indicators that tie to the new strategic plan that you adopted will be due 2 weeks later, July 29th. We put a due date on here to ensure a nice, strong reminder to all departments that that's something we need to be thinking of ahead of time and get that worked in. So then the weeks of August 5th through 16th, we'll have the budget hearings and with the departments. I would like to just mention, if you're going to be out on vacation, because that's a popular time to be out in the summer, please let us know the dates as soon as possible, because we're going to start putting these on the calendar to make sure we give everyone enough notice. Then after that, we will do our process, pull all the numbers together, and the county administrator will make his final recommendation. And then we will distribute the budget book on September 30th. This gives you 4 full weeks, almost a month, to review the budget book instead of 2 weeks. The 4 committees, and then you'll have another 2 weeks after that before the board vote. So it's giving you guys extra time to review the budget book. So hopefully that helps, and then we'll vote on it at the November 14th board meeting.
How's everybody feel about that? Much better? Yeah, much better. Thank you for working that in and taking our feedback. We
Yes.
really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So, are there any other questions regarding that? Okay, we are at public comment. And miscellaneous? Okay, we're adjourned.